The year was 1973. The United States was shifting, but in the small, tightly knit community of West Pittston, Pennsylvania, the focus was on rebuilding. Just a year prior, the remnants of Hurricane Agnes had swept through the Wyoming Valley, causing catastrophic flooding and displacing thousands. Among those seeking stability were Jack and Jonna Smurl. Jack, a blue-collar worker, and Jonna, a dedicated mother, moved into a modest double-block home on Chase Street. It was a duplex. The family of four, including their two young daughters, occupied one side. In a gesture of familial closeness and mutual support, Jack's parents, John and Mary Smurl, occupied the other half. To move was meant to be a return to normalcy, a fresh start after the chaos of the flood. They were a devout Catholic family, grounded in their faith and their community. The last thing they expected was for their new home to become a 15-year battleground between good and evil. The quiet intrusion, 1974 to 1975. The earliest disturbances were so subtle they were almost dismissed. They were the kind of fleeting anomalies easily rationalized away as the quirks of an old, settling house. Tools Jack was using for repairs would vanish from his workbench, only to reappear later in the garage or a different room entirely. Electrical issues plagued the house in ways that defied logical explanation. Lights would flicker wildly, and kitchen appliances would mysteriously malfunction, even when they were unplugged. The Smurls claimed to have witnessed unplugged appliances spontaneously catching fire. A constant, irritating issue involved the walls. After the hurricane, water damage was common, and the Smurls spent time repainting. Yet, despite fresh coats of paint, dark, ominous stains would seep back through the plaster within days. It was persistent, frustrating, and seemed to mock their efforts to improve their environment. The first psychological intrusions began with the manipulation of sound. Mary Smurl, Jack's mother, reported hearing voices calling her name, a male voice, or sometimes a voice identical to Jeanette's when she was alone. The calling would stop the moment she responded. Similarly, Jonna would hear what sounded like Jack and Mary engaged in heated, vicious arguments coming from the other side of the duplex, only to find them quietly reading or watching television. It was a calculated tactic, using their own loved ones' voices to generate fear, confusion, and distrust. As the years progressed, the phenomena evolved. The Smurls noticed an increasingly pervasive, sickening odor. They described it as the stench of rotting flesh or foul sulfur, so intense it would make them physically ill. Yet it would disappear just as quickly as it appeared, leaving no trace. Cold spots began to manifest, distinct areas in the house, where the air temperature would drop dramatically, even in the middle of summer, a chilling sign that something unnatural was at work. The decade of escalation, 1976 to 1985. By the mid-1970s, the entities residing in the house moved beyond simple pranks and sensory manipulation. The activity became overtly poltergeist-like and increasingly violent. The sounds became terrifying loud, inexplicable banging on the walls and ceilings that rattled the entire structure. The sound of heavy furniture being dragged across empty rooms, and occasionally, blood-curdling screams that neighbors later confirmed hearing. Even when the Smurl family claimed to be out of the house, the family's fear became paralyzing. They claimed the invisible force began to directly target them. In one harrowing incident, one of the Smurl daughters was inexplicably shoved down a flight of stairs by an unseen hand. The family dog, a large German shepherd named Simon, was also a victim. The Smurls claimed to have witnessed their dog levitate briefly, before being thrown with intense force against a wall. A close call occurred when the chandelier hanging above the kitchen table suddenly fell, narrowly missing one of the children. These events demonstrated a clearly malevolent intent, suggesting a force that sought not just to annoy but to inflict physical harm and possibly death. Adding to the family's torment were their own personal struggles. In 1983, Jack Smurl required surgery to remove water from his brain, a problem that may have stemmed from a bout of meningitis he suffered in his late 20s. Skeptics would later point to this medical history, suggesting that the strain, memory loss, and neurological issues related to his condition might have been a factor. In his later claims of paranormal activity, Mary Smurl also suffered a heart attack during this period, which the family attributed directly to the severe stress and fear caused by the demonic activity. The claim of sexual assault, the darkest and most controversial claims made by Jack and Jonna Smurl, involved repeated, brutal sexual assaults. As devout Catholics, the couple initially kept these details private, fearing shame and disbelief, but the persistent horror eventually compelled them to speak out. Jonna Smurl claimed she was repeatedly molested by an unseen entity while paralyzed in bed, often right next to a sleeping Jack. Jack, too, claimed to have been victimized. He described seeing a shadowy figure run up his wife's leg in the dark, and feeling a terrifying pressure and paralysis himself. In one highly specific and shocking account, Jack claimed he was lying on the living room couch, watching television, when he was sexually assaulted by a succubus, a female demon known in folklore for preying on men. The shame and spiritual violation associated with these events pushed the family to their breaking point, necessitating immediate and potent religious intervention. The church's intervention and failure terrified and spiritually exhausted, the Smurls turned to their ultimate recourse, the Catholic Church. Their pleas were for a formal, powerful exorcism to save them and their home. The Church's response was measured, following the strict protocols required before authorizing a major rite of exorcism. Several priests visited the house to perform blessings and minor exorcisms, or what are often termed deliverance prayers. One unidentified priest, referenced as Father Calloway in later accounts, agreed to stay in the home for a week to personally monitor the activity. According to the Smurls, the demon seemed to mock these attempts. The activity would often intensify during the prayers, with furniture rattling and the foul odor growing stronger, or the entity would simply move. Jonna Smurl claimed that the demon had found a way to move between the two sides of the duplex, effectively evading the localized religious rites being performed on the Smurl side. Jonna later insisted that the church performed 3 separate official exorcisms, all of which failed. The entity was described as too powerful, too intelligent, and too deeply entrenched in the structure of the home. This series of unsuccessful interventions left the family feeling abandoned and desperate, prompting them to seek external, unconventional help. The media storm and the Warrens, 1986. By 1986, the Smurls case had begun to leak into the local media, transitioning from neighborhood gossip to local news. The family's decision to go fully public was driven by a belief that only national exposure would compel the church or another powerful force to definitively address their plight. Their story reached the ears of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the world-renowned demonologists famous for their work on the Amityville Horror and the Smurl Haunting. The Warrens quickly arrived at the house on Chase Street. Lorraine Warren, utilizing her proclaimed clairvoyant abilities, immediately offered a definitive, terrifying assessment. She concluded that the Smurls were not merely dealing with a haunted house, but a full-blown demonic infestation involving multiple entities. She identified 4 distinct spirits: an elderly, relatively harmless woman, a violent, young girl, a male spirit who had allegedly suffered and died within the home, a single, all-powerful demon that controlled the other 3 human spirits and was the primary source of the terror, particularly the sexual assaults. Ed Warren, a self-proclaimed demonologist, backed his wife's claims, describing the demon as very powerful, intangible, and very dangerous. The Warrens spent months conducting their investigation, using audio recording equipment to capture evidence of the paranormal. They employed a religious provocation, constantly playing Gregorian chants, Christian music, and performing prayers in an attempt to drive the entity out. The demon, according to Ed Warren, retaliated violently. He claimed to have witnessed furniture shaking, felt dramatic and unnatural temperature drops, and saw a dark mass form and move through the house. In one of the most sensational claims, he reported that a mucus-like substance materialized on a mirror in the home, which then began to spell out filthy obscenities and warnings for him to get out. Ed Warren insisted he had collected hours of audio tape evidence, documenting the knocks, raps, and strange sounds caused by the demon. The involvement of the highly publicized Warrens exploded the story onto the national stage. The house on Chase Street became a media circus, besieged by reporters, camera crews, and paranormal thrill seekers. The Smurls appeared on major television programs, including Larry King Live and Entertainment Tonight, sharing their horrific story with millions. In late 1986, the Smurls, the Warrens, and local Scranton newspaper writer Robert Curran co-authored the book, The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare. The book's success solidified the Smurl Haunting as one of the most famous American paranormal cases of the decade. The voice of skepticism, the public and media frenzy, however, attracted intense scrutiny from scientific skeptics. Critics, notably led by the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal (SICOP), demanded access to the home to conduct controlled investigations. The Warrens and the Smurls consistently refused this access, which only fueled the skepticism. Paul Kurtz, a chairman for SICOP, publicly labeled the Smurls' claims as a hoax, a charade, a ghost story. Skeptics presented logical, non-paranormal explanations for every alleged event. Noises could be explained by the natural sounds of an old, settling duplex, or even by a family under extreme stress unconsciously creating the sounds themselves. Neighbors who reported hearing screams may have been influenced by suggestion. After the story became public, foul odors, likely due to environmental factors common in old homes, such as decaying organic material, sewer gas backup, or poor ventilation. Physical and psychological distress, attributed to stress, severe sleep deprivation, and psychological conditions like mass hysteria where anxiety and belief in a threat lead to shared physical symptoms and hallucinations within a group. Critics highlighted Jack Smurl's medical history, suggesting it might predispose him to such psychological phenomena. Lack of evidence. The most damning criticism was the total absence of empirical or physical evidence that could be independently verified. The spectacular claims rested solely on the testimony of the Smurl family and the Warrens, who stood to benefit from the book deal and media attention. Critics of the book, The Haunted, noted that it provided a deeply one-sided account, prioritizing sensationalism over investigative bounds. The Smurls' departure and the lingering question by 1987. Exhausted by the haunting and the relentless media harassment, the Smurls listed the Chase Street home for sale. They officially moved out in 1988, relocating to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The family had hoped that simply leaving the physical location would end their 15-year nightmare. Tragically, they claimed the haunting followed them. The Smurls reported a black mass and continued minor disturbances in their new Wilkes-Barre home, and even claimed the entity pursued them during a family camping trip. This suggested a more terrifying possibility, a demonic attachment to the family itself, rather than the property. However, after the move and a subsequent, undisclosed intervention by the Catholic Church in the late 1980s or early 1990s, which Sean S. Smurl claimed was a final, successful exorcism, the activity finally ceased. The Smurl family reported that their torment had ended, and they finally found peace. The house on Chase Street was sold to subsequent owners. A woman named Deborah Owens moved into the former Smurl side of the duplex in 1988 and told reporters she never encountered any supernatural occurrences while living there, further bolstering the skeptics' position that the phenomena were somehow unique to the Smurl family. The Smurl Haunting remains one of the most perplexing and highly debated cases in paranormal history. Jack Smurl passed away in 2017, and Jonna and her daughters have largely moved on, consistently affirming the absolute truth of their story. The case has achieved lasting fame, inspiring the 1991 TV movie The Haunted and serving as the foundational inspiration for an upcoming installment in the Conjuring film series. The central mystery remains: was the Smurl family subjected to an extended, genuine demonic assault, complete with physical and sexual violation, or were they the tragic victims of psychological trauma and mass suggestion? their story sensationalized by the investigators and media of the time. The truth, hidden behind the walls of a seemingly ordinary duplex in West Pittston, continues to elude a definitive answer. This expanded script is a much more robust narrative, providing all the available details and accounts. It is significantly longer than the previous version, giving you much more material to work with to hit your 40-minute target after editing.